The reason I bring up my inner cold and my outer cold is that I'm always aware at this moment every week as a point of reckoning of the prayer of Socrates that the inner man and the outer man be as one. And every week I try to make it so for a few minutes. And every week I fail. Not because of me, but because that is a challenge that cannot be met reliably. That kind of unity of spirit and self is something we all search for, and now and then achieve. Therefore, we must try over and over. And every Sunday that I do not succeed, I know another Sunday will come reliably 7 days later, with another opportunity to be a little more true, a little more wise, a little more honest. Grant me wisdom, grant me courage, as Harry Emerson Fosdick said in a great hymn. And may these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. I'm old enough to have had relatives who referred to November 11th as Armistice Day, when it was the memorial of the Great War, the war that ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Next year is the centennial of the beginning of that war, and already there are books and articles about how it shaped the world more than we give it credit for. The entire struggle of the Middle East was laid down then. This week, with all due respect to our living veterans who deserve every generosity we can muster, I'm thinking about the Great War a little more. In part because our tower room over there contains in part the official record of those in Kent County who served and died there. And while you may walk through every week and marvel at the mosaics, if you have a moment, read a name or two. You won't recognize them, but someday you will be gone too. And like those we held up in prayer, we hope that our names will have etched themselves somewhere and that someone will notice. But I want to go beyond even that. There will be authors and symposia, there will be parades and honors, and they are all deserved for everyone. I want to speak to those other dead who have also, in essence, died for our freedoms, but will not be known or lifted up or honored or carved on walls, who, as Ecclesiasticus says, have no memorial. They are not soldiers or sailors. They did not enlist in the service to defend us. They are, many of them, women and children. And I speak of those who every year die from gun violence here at home, at a rate so high that more people have died of guns in America since Robert Kennedy died than all the soldiers and all the sailors and all the Marines and all the airmen who ever died since 1775. That can't be right, you're thinking. You must have seen that, you're thinking, on some wild left-wing internet site that doesn't check its facts. The claim actually comes from the commentator Mark Shields on television a little under a year ago, in response to the killings in Newtown. Back on December 14th, he said, since Robert Kennedy died in the Ambassador Hotel on June 4th, 1968, more Americans have died from gunfire than have died in all the wars of this country's history. An outrageous claim. And so the group PolitiFact, that's a group of journalists working for the Tampa Bay Times that checks all these claims that politicians and pundits make. They went back and did it, and they went to the Department of Defense, into the FBI, into the CDC. Here's the number. According to the Department of Defense, since 1775, hardly a man is now alive that remembers that day in 75, to the year 2012, 1,171,177 men and women have died in service to their country during those wars. An astonishing number. Then you go to the FBI and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, that compile statistics. And since June 4th of 1968, 1,384,171 people have died by gunfire in the United States. Through robberies and crimes, suicides and accidents. Yes, it's true. In 45 years, we have sacrificed more people in our borders than we ever sacrificed them beyond or for our borders. And when I learned that fact a few weeks ago, I said, this needs to be noticed. I take no honor away from those who served. I take no honor away from those who died. We should honor. But how shall we honor these people who never enlisted, who never wore a uniform, who never marched in a parade, whose name is never etched anywhere, and yet who perished as much as any victim of war? Now, you have every right to be thinking that at this moment I'm going to talk about gun control, one of the hot button issues, and you'll be at least half wrong. I am going to talk about guns, but not about how to control them. And I am going to be political because any time you speak about issues that affect society, it is by definition a political utterance. But it is a sermon because what I'm going to try, and what I do not know whether I will accomplish, is to name something that everyone can agree on, no matter which position you defend or question. To make it a question of moral urgency that all of us can share, not that some of us can champion. If you remember anything today, here is what I want you to remember. That my premise is that each and every liberty and right we are guaranteed comes with an equal and commensurate responsibility to use that right and freedom for the good of all and the well-being of others. That's the thing you should remember. That's my premise. If you disagree with me here, if you think that all of our liberties are meant for you personally to do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want it, and the devil take the hindmost, then you will not like what I have to say. But if you agree that all of our liberties come with responsibilities, that all of our freedoms come with consequences, and that the exercise of every freedom is to be held accountable by the responsible use thereof, then we can move forward. But to understand where I'm going to go, we have to start not here, but in the town of Betanzos, Spain. It's a little medieval town where I spent the night about a month ago on my short walk along the Camino de Santiago. It's a wonderful town, but it was not wonderful the morning I woke up because it was raining. And I don't mean a nice little gentle rain. It was coming down in sheets. Remember, I am walking 12 to 14 miles today through the woods. It's raining. And after I take a short taxi ride to get to the trailhead, I'm dropped off. The man looks at me using his eyes rather than his voice to say, "Are you sure?" And I look at him and said, "Sí, señor. Muchas gracias. Buen día." And he closes the door, and I'm standing in the middle of the countryside. There's the trail. I know it's the right path. It goes uphill. And it goes uphill for the next hour. Up and up, away from the river and up to the top of the ridge. And I want you to imagine that it's raining. And that even if you have a raincoat and a pair of rain pants on, that it gets underneath of that. And so within 20 minutes, I could just as well have been stark naked. I was soaked. My feet are going squish, squish, squish as I go up the hill. And when I'm talking about up a hill, I'm not talking about going up Fountain Hill here. I'm talking about one where you need a walking stick to make sure you don't slip and fall. I was very glad to reach a clearing in about an hour where someone years ago had parked a ritual cross, the kind you see in Europe from time to time, where one was supposed to stop and kneel and pray, and I figured out it was also there for the catching of breath. Why am I telling you this? Well, sometimes our spiritual path is uphill in the rain, and there's no going back. Once you leave something behind, you can end up rather alone, a little bit lost, and the only choice you have is to put your foot ahead one more time. Sometimes your only known option is stepping with your left foot and your right foot, and then doing that over and over again. We like to think that spiritual life is going from serenity to serenity, from insight to depth and depth, until Buddha-like we walk through the world and people genuflect at our intense spiritual lives. But the reality is, spiritual life is a whole bloody lot of work, and you spend a lot of it going uphill in the rain, and the only thing you can do is take another step. And I want you to know that, because not only our spiritual lives inwardly, but our social lives outwardly are just like that. If you were as shocked as I was about how many people have died from gunfire in the last 45 years, then you're already trudging up that hill, wondering what to do next. And all I'm going to do in the next few minutes is teach you how to take 2 steps. That's it. The first step. This past September in the town of Vienna, in a school in Vienna Township here in Michigan, there was a news story about a man who came to pick up his daughter at school. And he arrived with a loaded pistol on his hip in a holster. And the people in the school were a little unhappy. Turns out he was very much within his rights. That in the state of Michigan, if you have a concealed carry permit or a concealed pistol license known as a CPL, you are also allowed to carry openly the same weapon into places otherwise prohibited. So, in fact, if you have a CPL, you could bring that weapon into church openly and loaded and be entirely legal. Does that bother anyone? I feel uneasy, I have to admit. I do feel uneasy. Much as Theodore Roosevelt's policy of speak softly and carry a big stick, if someone is talking to me gently with a gun in his or her hand, I'm likely to be more deferential than to someone who doesn't have a gun in his or her hand. It's not what you call an equal conversation. But I can also imagine someone feeling equipped, trained, and capable of being of service, having that weapon at the ready.